So here's a guy that traveled 167 days a year around the world, represented us as YPOers and did a great job, ran a business, kept a marriage together, and helped raise 3 kids. So with that, McKeel Hagerty.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's make sure this is working. I have this really robust headset. So, yeah, it's just, you're going to, hopefully you'll hear me if you have to look at all this hardware on my head. So thank you for that really kind introduction. And that was awesome. Really, very, very kind. You know, it's funny when you think about this weird role of leading YPO. And for, I think, all of us, YPO has been, at least in some fashion, a pretty life-changing experience. And I've had the opportunity to speak on behalf of YPO around the world, both to members, but to, you know, business leaders and world leaders, and to do all sorts of things for the past couple of years. And, you know, I generally start with the basic thought that, you know, I joined this organization as a young business leader. I was 32 years old, and it just changed every aspect of my life. And I didn't have a business education. I thought I was going to be a priest, and for a while, that was my near brush with the priesthood. And then I had sort of a near brush with being a philosophy professor when I did my doctoral work in ancient philosophy and Greek. So as we get a little further into my remarks, if I go into some like obscure tunnels of stuff, I apologize. It's just how my mind works. But I found that it gave me a pretty refreshing view about business, to be able to step into the business world, because my biggest fear of coming back to join my family company was that I thought business was going to be really boring. Seriously, I thought it would be kind of intellectually boring. What could possibly be interesting about it? And it wasn't until I joined YPO a couple years later in 2000 that I realized there were these just amazing individuals out there. They weren't just growing businesses. They weren't just trying to grow companies and talk about EBITDA and all these things that I had no business even understanding at the time, but they were growing themselves, and they were growing because they were growing themselves, and the way they were growing themselves is that they were transforming their companies. They were shaping the lives of their employees, and they were shaping their communities, and they were changing the world. And I was pretty intrigued by that. Wow, here's a group of people that when they get together, they change lives, but like in a really profound personal way. And I've come to realize over the last, whatever it is now, 18 years, that there's a choice at the heart of YPO. There's a choice. And I'm a big fan of David Brooks' Road to Character. By the way, on your seats, I offered you both a reading list and a podcast list. I'm a big reader. Sorry about that. So I have my guilt pile. I have my big guilt pile of books waiting that I need to go read, and a lot of books that I've read. I'm also a big fan of podcasts. One of my, I'll talk about a few of these things as we go along. I believe that if you want to supercharge your learning, you want to read a book, go listen to the podcasts of the authors, interviews about their book, and that when you get in the back of your head the author's voice talking about their book, as you read it, you can actually read the book faster, your comprehension is better, and that you can remember it better. So I was able to kind of more than double my kind of uptake of the reading I could do by listening to podcasts and then reading the book afterwards. So it's been pretty interesting. But back to David Brooks' Road to Character and what is at the heart of YPO. I believe that at the heart of YPO is a choice. And the choice that we make is, are we going to choose our better selves every day? Or are we going to choose for our lower selves, or to just maintain? And I think what's inspired me about YPO, and why as I was growing my company and as I got into leadership of YPO and eventually was elected chairman, which I was honored to do, is that I was inspired most by the people who tended to choose for their better selves every day, a little bit more. They viewed the next day as an opportunity to learn a little bit something, not just about the world around them, but what they could do within themselves, and they started rewiring themselves. And rather than viewing themselves as sort of a complete individual who was so smart running this company, going to make a bunch of money, that they viewed themselves as sort of a more of an infinite individual with an opportunity to learn and grow and to do really interesting things with themselves and with their lives and with their communities. And so I think that I started that path, just like many of us have, which is to choose my higher self. We don't do it every day. We don't do it in equal measure. We slip. That's not what it's about. It's not about that. It's just that that's the choice at the heart of the YPO journey that I was presented with, and it's why I chose, you mentioned the number of days I traveled during the YPO chairman gig, and it was worth every bit. And I want to share some of those stories with everybody. I'm going to share some stories that I learned along the way, some of the people that I met, and I'm going to hope to connect it to this concept of legacy and kind of how I view legacy. So this is a little bit more of like a meditation on some concepts around legacy. Not you guys, maybe if you went to the sessions today, hopefully you learned some great stories. You learned some of the opportunities and pitfalls about how we can take the wealth and the just incredible benefits that we've gained from what we do in our business lives and share it with the world. Because I can tell you the world is changing. The world of success is redefining right now around impact. If there's anything I've learned about traveling around the world, talking to business leaders and thinking about the next generation, is that impact is the world we are all going to be living in. And in YPO, I was sharing at our dinner table tonight, we recognize that the 100% of all the new members of YPO by the year 2023 will be millennials. 100% of all the new members, and that next generation is they have a different view of what business is about, and impact, in whatever way you want to define it, is going to be the only thing that they care about. Other than, obviously, they're going to be interested in their success, personally and for their families. But they're not going to join an organization that is not interested in connecting them with impact. And so one of the big things we've been working on in the YPO world is about that. Is that we have to get more comfortable speaking about impact, not just EBITDA. We have to start thinking about different dimensions of how success is defined than your balance sheet or your bottom line. Those are important, but it's going to be impact that's going to change the world. And as business leaders, we're the ones that can affect that better than anything, because every single thing on the planet starts with what we create as business leaders. Governments can't collect taxes if businesses don't make the money. Charitable organizations, they can't survive if people don't make money to do it. And we're the people that can actually change the world pretty significantly. So it's been a pretty humbling experience, and that's the real reason I'm here. So the other thing that, by the way, David Brooks' Road to Character talks about, and to start kind of digging into this legacy concept, is that he talks about there's two sets of values that we all live by. One is, are you going to live, or values or virtues? There are resume values and there are eulogy values. And your resume values are the things that you do to get ahead in the world, to get your next job, to make your business grow a little bit more. But it's your eulogy values that are going to be the things that people talk to you about when you're gone. And I'm sorry, I get it. You guys very delicately balanced around the whole thing about legacy, and we don't want to talk about the morbid aspects about it. But I was almost a priest, so I'm pretty comfortable talking about what happens after you're gone. So I'm sorry if I touch on some subjects that make people uncomfortable. But we're all YPO members here, and we're gonna push our comfort zone a little bit. No, I will never get morbid. Don't worry. But I love this image of, what are the values you're living by, which is, and we see it around the world in YPO. We see it in our businesses. We see it in our regular lives. It's the trade-off that we make between our resume values and our eulogy values. What is short-term? What is long-term? What are the things that are about permanence versus impermanence? So I strongly recommend, by the way, of all the books, one of the books that, if there are a few that I would recommend on the big long list there, is Road to Character by David Brooks. It's very interesting. So on to some obscurity, and just so that I can get to a fun point. Today is March 15th, which in the ancient Roman calendar was the Ides of March. Today is the Ides of March. And this is, of course, made most famous in Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar, because Caesar, the most powerful, wealthiest man in the world, was warned, beware of the Ides of March. The Ides of March, it's a word that they referred to as the middle of the month. Ironically, the Ides of March in the ancient Roman calendar was the day when debts were settled. Sort of like if you'd imagine when you ask an American, it's April 15th. What's April 15th? Tax day. The Ides of March was a significant day. I mean, just kind of like that's how people thought about it. And the soothsayer said, beware of the Ides of March. And it was sort of the middle of the day as the story goes, and Caesar ignored the warning, said, hey, I'm alive. I woke up. It's the Ides of March. It's March 15th. And he said, I'm going to go speak to the Senate. Top of his game. Top of his game. Most powerful, wealthiest guy on the planet. I mean, I don't know who you'd compare the person to today. And sure enough, what happens? Shows up at the Senate to give a speech, gets assassinated, right? Doesn't actually get assassinated, gets like mobbed to death. Kind of a bad deal. Like, Caesar's end was not like one lone shooter. It was like he had it wrong. And it was sort of the end for him. And I think the point is, that I'm trying to make, because I just think it's a clever point that it's the Ides of March. How cool for us. We're talking about legacy, is beware when you're at the top of your game. Beware when you're at the top of your game. Every single one in this room, in some fashion, is at the top of their game. And you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There will be a mountain that we all kneel in front of. We know it. We know it. That's why we're here talking about legacy. That's why these things matter. That's why we have these conversations. That's why we can do it in this safe place in YPO. So I was elected chairman of YPO in Osaka, Japan in the fall of, was it 2015 actually? And we have this really elaborate process of electing the chairman of YPO. It's kind of like the puff of smoke at the Sistine Chapel. And so the one thing that when you show up at the board meeting, only a board member of YPO can be elected chairman, is that somebody's going to get elected, and whoever is going to get elected doesn't know who's electing them, and you don't know who you're running against. Like, it's a mind-boggling amount of secrecy that goes into running the process. So the night before, everybody has to order room service. Everybody's sequestered in their rooms. You don't know who's going to go out and elect you. You don't know who else you're running against. All you know is that at some point there's going to be a knock on your door. And the knock on the door is going to be the past chairman and the current chairman knocking on your door saying, I'm so sorry you were not elected chairman of YPO, or congratulations, you were elected chairman. So this was a couple hours after I was elected chairman, and the person on my left is Bernie Aoyong from Hong Kong, and the person on my left, but the photo left and the photo right is Santiago Sanchez from Guadalajara, Mexico. And I think what connects this to the Ides of March is it was a great day of my life. My wife sat between me and the window to make sure I didn't jump out in Japan if I got bad news. I was excited about it at that point. You're not supposed to express interest, by the way. That's the other weird thing. You can't campaign. You're supposed to just kind of act casual, like, yeah, sure, I'd do it if I was elected. And in reality, you want it pretty bad at that point. And so, got elected. But what I didn't know is that at this point, this day, is that the people that I was going to be working most closely with for the next 2 years between Bernie and Santiago is that Santiago was already fatally ill with cancer. And just a few months later, he'd be gone. And, a guy who was really a close personal friend at that point, and who I said to him, our lives, our hearts are going to be knit together. I said those words to him. I didn't realize a few months later he'd be gone. And that my very first speeches, and when I had to step in early as chairman of YPO, would be his eulogy and eulogizing him around the YPO world, because this was a guy who had a legacy. And his legacy is that, talk about leading from the heart. He was a passionate leader, an incredible guy. And he just inspired people wherever he went. And yet there I was, newly minted chairman, having to talk about his passing. And the reality with it for me was that I was now having to go forward because the past chairman actually serves a really important duty on the YPO board, and I wasn't going to have that guy. And Bernie would be gone, and I would be alone. And it was going to be brutal in all of these days of travel and running the board. And by the way, if you've never run a board with 22 CEOs on it, it is a whole lot of fun when you have no help, because as you might imagine, a lot of ego and a lot of opinions, and I was solo, and it was brutal. And, you know, I felt like I had a ghost laughing at me. He had this great laugh, Santiago, and I miss him very much. So here's the problem with the Western world, and here's the problem with YPO. I believe this is the Western view of life, and I believe this is the YPO world view of life. We start the world on the left, and we kind of grow up and we gain speed, and maybe we become successful, and you have families and you gain experience and all this sort of thing. And at some point, strangely, a long time ago in YPO, they decided it was 50 years old. Your life starts declining, right? Bunch of gold members here. I just turned 50. I'm with you. No worries. If you want to afterwards find out why we named the whole thing gold, I'm happy to tell you the story. I was in the room when we made the decision. It was a good one. Don't worry. Is that that's the problem, is that somehow the view of life in the Western world is that somewhere in the middle of it, you've gained the maximum capacity, your maximum capabilities. Your life is now going downhill from then on. And it's baked into YPO. It's baked into our lives. You're right. What could possibly be better at 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 than it is at 30 or 40? And this bell curve is a reality that, and it's a perception, it's a mental model, by the way, a mental model that we allow to live in our lives every single day, and it affects us very much. And I'm convinced it's one of the reasons why we struggle with legacy, and I'll explain to it in a little while. So here's another graph. What's it look like? Like an EKG or maybe a market model, right? So how many of our members here have done in a forum retreat a lifeline? Show of hands. Okay. Is there anyone here who just doesn't know what a lifeline exercise is? And I'll explain it in 30 seconds if you don't. Cool. It's okay if you don't. But so the point is, right, when you go to a forum retreat and you're going to do the lifeline exercise, this is the mother of all retreat exercises, right? And the setup is right. You know, you've got 0 to 10 on the left side, and then on the horizontal axis, you have from 0, your birthday, to the year you are, right? Everybody get that? And then you get to stand up in front of the room and map out on a whiteboard or a big piece of paper how you view your life, right? You're going to talk, you know, I was born in Traverse City, Michigan, and I had great parents, and I had 2 sisters. And then you start telling the story, and it can last 20, 30 minutes per person. And I don't know about you guys. Now I know it's St. Patrick's Day coming up, and I'm like an emotional Irish guy, but everybody cries at some point during the lifeline, right? All right? Like, there's no way you're getting through a forum retreat doing lifeline and not have the majority of the people cry. Every single one of us is a product of both the awesome things that have happened to us in our life when you're a child, with your parents, with your upbringing, wherever you are, to the challenges you might have had, to the loss of a parent, to the loss of a grandparent, to alcoholism, to all sorts of weird things that can happen, to marriage, to multiple marriages, to the birth of your children. A lifeline is it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing exercise for what it pulls out. So I want to ask you to envision with me right now your children in YPO in some future year, and you may or may not be with us anymore, and they are at their first forum retreat. Let's just call it in Beaver Creek at the Ritz. And they're about to do the lifeline. And they are going to stand up in front of the room like all of us did, and they're going to tell their life story, and they're going to cry. They're going to cry. And my question to you is, are they going to, and they're going to, by the way, they're going to cry because of you. Just like you did talking about your parents. You did. And so my question for you is, are they going to cry because of something you did or of something you didn't do? Is it the giving of something that you did, or is it the absence of something you did? Because that is, in the end, what legacy is all about. I would submit. This is a meditation on legacy. Are they going to be thanking you for everything you did? Or is it going to be, they just weren't there? Or whatever. We all face that. It's the, it's the benefit and the guilt of parenting. But that is what Lifeline is, because you all did it yourself, and you know what I mean. So as we kind of go through it, I want to share a couple quick thoughts with you. I would submit to you this, and this is it. Where my wife and I are going to go see Hamilton on Saturday, so it's a perfect one. It's an awesome quote, which is, what is legacy? It's planting a seed in a garden you will never get to see. That's what legacy is. And I would submit to you by the title of this, legacy is about letting go of the need to measure your success. And if I have a sum total just lesson for me and for all of us, and as YPO members who have been given maybe not everything, but you earned everything, and you deserve to be here, and you deserve to be sitting at an event that talks about legacy and changing the world, is that yet real legacy is about planting seeds that you'll never get to see grow. That's a simple fact. So this is, in addition to the book list and the podcast list, these are some people that I met and spent time with along my journey as a YPO chairman. So you'll see, you may not recognize everybody here, but we have, some heads of state. There are a few in there. There are a lot of smart people. There's some YPO members. There's some musicians. There are some sons and daughters. And, I spent some time with Queen Rania last week. I had about an hour with her in Singapore, which was an amazing experience. And I want to share a couple of specific examples of some things that you might think about that I learned from these people, that as you think about your own journey towards legacy and what we can all learn from it. This is not about my experiences as chairman. This is about what I want to share with you. And it's kind of, it's been pretty interesting. And so I'm going to first start with kind of two challenge scenarios and then some opportunities for us. So one challenge scenario that I'd like to share with us when we think about legacy is that every single one of you here is amazing at what you do. And I met a few of you. I haven't met all of you, and I would love to be able to do so. This is an amazing chapter, amazing group of chapters in Chicago, one of the powerhouse regions of YPO in the world, let alone the United States. It's true. Actually, one of the very few cities that actually grew in membership during the financial crisis globally in all three chapters here. I'm speaking YPO, which is remarkable. Almost no other region in the planet could make that claim. And I know the numbers, so it's true. Congratulations. Is that I want to talk about legends for a minute. How hard it is, in particular, to be the son or the daughter of a legend. We've all seen it, right? You've all probably you ever met like the son or daughter of a major sports figure or a head of state or somebody who's really successful? How brutal is that life? How brutal is that? Seriously. Because almost no one considers their life on their own. They have such a hard time balancing the benefit or the pain of following that lead in any significant way. So one I'd like to point out is, for example, Hsien and I almost lost my wife this day to Justin last year in Vancouver. Got to spend a little bit of time with the Prime Minister. And for those of you who know, son of the former Prime Minister Pierre, who was the legend, one of the gods of Canada. And what was amazing to him is how he managed around this, right? Like nobody took him seriously because he's too good looking. He was too privileged. His mother was famous equally as his late father. And no one was going to take his leadership seriously. And yet this guy, of any head of state I met, had the most programmatic way to make sure nothing goes wrong in his life. Like the loosey-goosey stuff other public figures just let happen. This guy didn't leave anything to chance. His cabinet is a perfect balance of every ethnic and religious group in Canada. His security team is a perfect mix of every ethnic and gender diversity. I mean, he does not leave a thing to chance because he knows no one believes him. The the brutal nature of the fact that he was the son of a legend is what he's had to grow past to actually grow into his own life. Just remarkable. And we need to think about that as we cast shadows across our children's lives and our success. Remember that. You want them to be awesome, but remember, sometimes your awesomeness is what holds them back. It's difficult to think about. Another person in this that I discovered that was sort of interesting this way was just last week. So this is Prime Minister Lee from Singapore, and his father was literally the god of Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, the guy that created Singapore, this outpost of amazing ideals and an amazing legal system. It's the only one like it in Southeast Asia. And what do you think it's like for his entire adult life to have to live under this shadow of his father? Incredible. I spent a bunch of time with him. He was asked the question from the main stage at the GLC, but I had to follow it up. I mean, I'm just like, what was it like? What was this like? I mean, do you feel like a vote for you was just really a vote for your father, but he just isn't here anymore? And he said, well, my father just left me one thing. And he said, protect Singapore, but make it better. And he said it was that second part of it was the only thing I hung on to my entire career. Protect Singapore, the thing his father created, but make it better. The words we use when we cast these long shadows over our kids in a legacy fashion matter. And so just choose them carefully, because someday they're going to be on stage as the head of state somewhere talking about you, and you hope it's a good thing. Second caution, and it's interesting. This is a different one, and I kind of have a photo I'll show you right now. I call it kind of like the two jobs. You know, the reality is this, right? When we become successful, every single one of you had a track record of proven success along the way. That's what happens in YPO. You're probably a good student, or you're a good athlete. You probably, I get it. You survived and you triumphed through adversity. But the reality is that you had two jobs all the way. You not only had to accomplish the stuff that you did, you generally had to also prove that you accomplished the stuff that you did. What happens when you ultimately achieve success as a YPO member around the world, and I've seen this everywhere, is this trade-off of when do I stop worrying about proving the point? When do I move from both doing it and proving it to just doing it anymore? And probably the biggest impediment that I have seen around the world of meeting that great group of people, this group of people, is that the ones that make the leap from trying to prove that they were successful to just doing it are the ones that actually leave the longest legacy. A person who, actually the guy who taught me this whole concept is right here. If another book on my list, one of the most impactful books in my life, Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote the book Sapiens, book that both Bill Gates and Barack Obama said it was the most impactful book they read in the last decade. If you haven't read it, please read it. You'll understand your mind better at the end of it. I was over at Tel Aviv at the Touch Israel event, which, by the way, if you haven't been, please go sign up for it. Amazing event. It'll be life-changing for you. And I spent about an hour with Yuval and talked about this problem. And he said there's this challenge. This is just that people have to prove what they're doing at the same time. And it's the thing that, in general, in world history, when you go back and look at it, it's the thing that holds them back the most. And so when are we going to get rid of the two jobs? When do we finally give ourselves permission to get rid of that second job and actually go allow the legacy to be created? Because we're not, by the way, in charge of our legacies. The world is in charge of your legacy. Just like you don't own your brand of your companies, your customer owns your brand in their mind. You don't own your legacy. It's none of your business. It's their business, not yours. You can influence it, but you can't control it. Another concept, and we were talking about it at the table, is an idea. It's an image I kind of refer to as kind of be the rock. If you think about it, just take the image of if you grabbed a handful of sand and you throw it on a flat glass calm lake or pond or whatever, is that it kind of dissipates pretty quickly. But you throw a rock, it creates the ripples, right? I mean, if there's anything I learned from this group is that the people that had a single action that they were taking, or they found a lever point that they could just drill all the way down into, they could create amazing impact in their companies, in their regions, in whatever it is they're doing. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples here. Let me see. Who should we go with? The one that was fun at the table, I'll share this one. So this is not a famous person, but one of the most impactful YPO members I've ever met. His name is Abhijit Pawar. And Abhijit's one of those guys that was like from one of those Maharaja families in India. So very privileged, extremely privileged. 100,000 employees, every single industry you could imagine in India. I mean, from manufacturing to hotels to real estate. I remember when he told me, it's like, yeah, we do insurance, we do banking, we do all that. I'm like, what, what don't you do, Abhijit? I remember this whole thing, but he's passionate about making impact. And yet, how do you make impact in a country of 1 billion people with that much poverty? If you've not been to India, it's pretty shocking. If you've been to India, you know what I'm talking about, is that he has this amazing thing that he's done. His single issue is actually around, he believes, and it's the issue which I happen to believe is one of the things that we could all be working on that will change the world, is literacy and education for girls in poor parts of the world. And and Abhijit has a unique angle on it in India because, again, really privileged guy. And I said, how do you do this in India? And he said, I figured it out. You go into these poor villages, and the boys and the men all go off and work, and the girls and the moms and the grandmas kind of tend to the household, and they're kind of doing more like household work. And he said, I discovered the challenge. He said, because the boys won't let the girls, the men won't let the women be educated, therefore the girls don't learn to read, and therefore it creates this kind of vicious cycle. And he said, but I discovered something. He said, it's the grandmas. The trick is getting to the grandmas. He said, if I can teach a grandma to read, she will teach her daughter, and they will teach the granddaughters. And he said, so I created a whole program. I go into these, and his funny joke, and I'll tell you, I'm sorry if this is a little offensive to you, but it's great. I wish I could do his Indian accent. He said, I don't care how much of an asshole you are, McKeel, you can't turn down your grandma, right? Everybody listens to their grandma. And he said, so if I could, and it's true. So he'd go into these villages and he teaches his grandmas to read, and it changes the whole village. Not overnight, because you got to teach a grandma, older woman, to read. But it just changed his world. So there are all these pictures of Abhijit standing with like 10,000 grandmas. It's absolutely hilarious. That's that single action. That's about being the rock. Like, pick your thing that's going to be the rock that's going to create the ripples in your ocean. That's how you leave a legacy. And, there are many people here who have done those sorts of things. It's absolutely remarkable in almost every way. I mean, the other one that kind of connects with that, I would say this to you, of people that I talk to, is that the higher the ideals you attach yourself to, the longer lasting and the more impactful your legacy will likely be. The higher the ideals, the longer lasting and the more impactful it will be. If it's, and it's sort of like the bigger you go, the better you get. One of the most fascinating conversations I had was with Kofi Annan, who was a former Secretary General of the United Nations, really interesting guy. And I happened to be struggling, believe it or not, at the time in YPO with an issue we had going on between the Israeli chapter and the Palestine chapter. What a shocker. And I'm like, well, hey, as long as I have you, I might as well ask how we dig underneath this thing. But the most interesting sidebar of the whole thing is I said, look, you knew Mandela. And I want to ask you a couple questions about Mandela. Like, how did it work? Like, what was it like? Because here is a guy, we all know the story, 27 years in prison, and as a prisoner had more impact than the president of the country de Klerk. Like, what was it? And he said, well, first of all, he had the guts to rewire himself. That is the YPO journey, by the way. The YPO journey is you have the guts to rewire yourself. You don't make excuses about where you came from or who you are or what your biases are. You just start rewiring it. And he said he rewired himself because he could have been a revolutionary. He was actually prepared. Mandela was actually preparing to go to war. Gets in prison, kind of gets rid of all of that, and he started attaching himself to a higher set of ideals, which he knew if he could challenge his country, both the whites and the blacks of South Africa, to attach themselves to a higher set of ideals, he could actually affect change once he got out of prison. And he had more effect, arguably, when he was in prison than out. And so, again, I would suggest, how do you be the rock? Attach yourself to high ideals and pick a single issue, and it will absolutely blow your mind. I want to move through this because I want to honor everybody's time. Another interesting person, and I guess I would say this. So right now we have, just so I can remind everybody, we have beware of being what it's like to be the children of a legend, right? We've got, don't forget, get rid of your second job of proving your success. It's the only way you're going to actually create a legacy, and be the rock, have high ideals. The other one was interesting, and it's unfortunately almost the same time that my predecessor Santiago passed away, so did Shimon Peres. So when I went to Israel to do my visit, when the YPO chairman goes to Israel, you also go to Palestine, you also go to Jordan, you do this thing. I had a fascinating tour of the Middle East. So I didn't get to meet Shimon Peres, but I spent quite a bit of time with, this is his son, Hemi. If you don't know Hemi, again, son of a legend problem. It's fascinating how he's learned to deal with it. But the quote that, arguably defined Shimon Peres more than anything, and that, I personally find the most inspiring, is this, core idea, which is the greatest mistake. This is a Shimon Peres quote. The greatest mistake was that our dreams were too small. You have, dream of great things, and you will achieve them. And I would say this is an especially important message for YPO members. You guys can do anything you set your mind to. Anything you set your mind to. And if you set your mind to a small dream, you know what's going to happen? You're going to achieve it. You're going to get there, and what are you going to feel like? And if there's anything I learned from him, and I've started realizing, is that the ones who, the members that we have in our world that set their sights on higher dreams are the ones that really are the ones that are changing the world. So, dreaming big is, I know it sounds kind of airy-fairy in some ways, but it's incredibly important to us. What are the things that you can actually do that significantly change the world? I mean, last week, somebody said they were at the GLC. Last week. Yeah, that's right. So did you hear Billie Jean King? She was she was final speaker, final day at the Edge. It was fascinating. Yeah, I got it. No, I get it. That's okay. She was interesting, actually, off stage, much more impressive than I expected. But, she talked all about this, is that tennis was just her platform to make a difference in the world. And the legacy she wanted to leave was primarily about equality for men and women and equal pay. And what was remarkable about it is this idea of, if you dream big enough, you're going to achieve. If you dream small dreams, you're going to get them. That's the problem when you're really talented. It's brutal, absolutely brutal when you have, if you're not setting yourself up to a high enough standard. Coming back real quickly. Sorry. And I guess I'd say this, and I want to kind of move us a little bit closer towards a conclusion, and I could talk all night about these people. They were amazing. Somebody I was connected with late last year is this guy, and he wrote a book. It's mentioned in my list called, it's The Five Invitations. His name is Frank Ostaseski. So this is an event about legacy, and I said I wouldn't get into a morbid space. But he wrote the book, which is, he is the first person, he doesn't look like it, but he's a Zen Buddhist, and he created the first ever Zen Buddhist hospice in the United States, in San Francisco. And the book, The Five Invitations, is about what we can learn from death about life. And he gave a very, very powerful speech at the GLC, actually, last week about what are the things you can learn from people who are passing away? Why, what are the mistakes that especially Westerners make of thinking about, those final years, those final hours even of somebody's life? And what he realized is a couple of key messages. One is, it's never too late. It is never, ever too late to start making a difference in the most meaningful things in your life. This idea that you're going to kind of work really hard and then hopefully have some miraculous deathbed experience that's going to enlighten the planet is unlikely to happen, because, as he said, it's very possible that you're going to be really drugged up at that point in your life. And the time to start getting used to what life really matters about is right now. It's right now. And what he said is, it's kind of an interesting couple of quotes, which is, he said, he discovered after literally being with thousands of people in their final moments of life, and in their final weeks, and many of them as he talked to them, is that there were actually only two questions that people have at that point in their life. And one is this one: was I loved? Was I loved? Right? Your children and doing their lifeline. That's what you're gonna wonder, this connection. Was I loved? And the second one is, did I love well? It's the only two things that anybody cares about at the end of their life, really. And the rest will take care of itself. A poem that I really like, by the way, that I'm convinced is where Frank stole this, but I wouldn't challenge him to that, it's a great poem by Raymond Carver, and it's called Late Fragment. And it's this. And did you get what you wanted from this life, even so? Even so is the key part. Did you get from this life what you wanted, even so? I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved and to feel myself beloved on this earth, right? Am I loved or did I love well? That's the only thing anybody's going to care about in the end. And so you're living that way. And I realized that this is played out over and over again in the YPO world. So I come back to our, I think, flawed mental model of life in the West. And that, we as YPO members have been buying into ever since we decided we had to graduate at 50 and become, well, now gold members. Is that this is not actually what life has to look like at all. This is not the mental image of what life has to look like. There are actually things that we can do better in the second half of our life than we did in the first half of our life. And why is that? I'm convinced it's because we don't care about all the same stuff that we did in the first half of our life. A guy that his picture wasn't up there, his name is John Anderson. He created a process called the legacy map, which he challenged you to sort of map out your life to the end of your life. And he talks a lot about this challenge of what are the things you could do better late in your life. And he's about a 60-year-old guy. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me how you think about this, John. And he said, I'm convinced 100% that there are things I will do better at 70 than I can do now at 60. And I remember like, really? Like what? Please share this with me. And he said, I have one for you. And he said, have you ever received a note from someone that's so good that it just changed your whole life? Like something that's so well written to you at the time that it just changed your life. And like you'd frame it and put it on the wall. The greatest thing ever said to me. And he said, I dream about writing notes like that. I dream that I could do it, but he said, I'm not there. I write notes every day. I write notes of gratitude. I said, I think I'm going to need until I'm about 70 until I can do it right. I thought, what an awesome thing. I mean, how cool is that? Like something he was really working at. And now this is a guy who still skis black diamonds and, snowmobiles 20,000 miles a year at 60. I mean, he's like, I'm still going to do all that. He said his dream for himself is at 90, he's standing on top of a black diamond with his grandchildren next to him. And his grandchildren, he actually has a picture drawn of this, is that he has a grandchild's friend sitting there like, dude, your grandpa is cool. And the grandson in this drawing says, yeah, well, he's just always been like this. This is just the kind of guy he is. How awesome is that? So what can you do better 10 years from now than you can do right now? Pretty cool. So I think the better model that we ought to look at looks a little bit more like that, honestly, is that I think that there probably is a season of life where we accumulate a lot. We accumulate experiences. We accumulate wealth. You guys are all going to decide how to give it away and change the world. It's awesome. We learned a lot about that today. But I think this is about us. And what does our life look like now? And how do we want to live so that when our children do that lifeline at their forum retreat, that it's not about something you didn't do, but it's about something you did? I think that's actually the YPO journey. I think it's the YPO journey played out in legacy. And so please take that back to your forums because I'd love to see that happen. So I guess I'd finish with this. I'll show you a picture of what I hope is my legacy, is that I guess by my reckoning, how I think about legacy is this, is that these are people, just like these books and these podcasts have shaped who I am today. I'm just fundamentally a different person than I was even just a couple of years ago. And I'm grateful to have done what I did on behalf of YPO and to do some cool stuff around the world. But, these people shaped my life from conversations that I had with them or experiences. And I guess in some fashion, I'm their legacy now. And I'm totally comfortable with that. I have no problem talking about whatever lessons and truths they shared with me, because that's what we do. The higher the ideals, the more we're the rock, the more that we get rid of measuring ourselves, the more that we get rid of the legend complex, and the more that we realize that it is never too late to make those decisions about being better, because that's at the heart of what it is to be YPO every day. And it's been pretty amazing for me, as I imagine it is for you. So for me, that's, I hope, my legacy. My wife, Hsien, and my 3 daughters, and a pretty cool Plymouth. Big boat, actually. Not very fun to drive. But it's all right. So, you know, I guess my final thought is this, and I'm happy to take a question. I probably blew through my time. I'm bad at keeping time. Is that, you know, our job is this. If you really want to talk about what legacy is, it's about, you know, it is truly about carving your name on hearts, not on tombstones. There's nothing you're going to do with any amount of wealth you've created or you will pass on or you'll put in any foundation or any kind of giving that will mean as much or longer than what you write on the hearts of the people you love and that love you. And what a cool experience that we get to do that even better every day as YPO members. So with that, thank you. I hope it's been interesting.